Okay, good.
I hope you are really enjoying this in every way. And just wanted to check just before we get started. Is there anybody who needs to leave early? I just thought I'd ask, you know. Okay, I didn't see any hands, so ushers, block the doors. I want to personally promote Rabbi Lapin's books and materials. I had the privilege of, I think, receiving them really kind of before they went on sale, particularly the CDs of his study from the Torah, beginning in Genesis, and some of the keys to revelation and understanding the Hebrew mindset and so forth and the Hebrew language from the Old Testament. If you are a pastor, these are tools you absolutely should have. And for every New Testament Christian, you should have this book, Thou Shalt Prosper, 10 Commandments for Making Money. Now, I like this so much. The only thing about it is it makes me look bad. This book is not just a book. This is a library. I think your wife Susan said you should have made several books out of it, Rabbi. But this is a library. It is a classic. It is an amazing thing. I want to read just a couple of quotations for you regarding the book. Rabbi Daniel Lapin is a light to the nations, a risk-taking rabbi of immense wisdom. His books have already influenced countless Jews and non-Jews with the eternal truths of the Hebrew Bible. In this highly insightful, controversial new book, Rabbi Lapin unearths the golden nuggets of Jewish business genius. By emphasizing the unique talents of the Jewish way of life, Rabbi Lapin demonstrates how Judaism's spiritual regimen can be translated into tangible material rewards, with the bottom line being directly affected. A thoroughly engaging, enriching, and thought-provoking book. And that's from Rabbi Shmuley Botek, who's the author of Kosher, Sex, and Judaism for Everyone. Don't let that bother you. Okay. From the Honorable Jack Kemp comes this quote: Rabbi Lapin is an unorthodox rabbi. He understands the biblical nature of economic freedom as well as he understands the Bible uniquely well. Prosperity must have a purpose, and Rabbi Lapin explores the wellsprings of the Judeo-Christian heritage to elucidate those purposes. In so doing, he also illuminates the road to greater prosperity for all. I really enjoyed this book. Hardly recommend it to people of all faiths. The Honorable Jack Kemp. Rabbi Lapin is such a blessed man, and the Lord has used him to touch so many across our nation. He's been an advisor to President Bush. He's been on, of course, countless television programs. He is a noted speaker and has been used, I think, probably more than 50 speeches every year to corporations like Amway, Nordstrom, Boeing, and so forth. We have a short introduction by way of video that we'd like to present, and then I'd like to have you welcome to this platform Rabbi Daniel Lapin.
Rabbi Daniel Lapin is a noted scholar, best-selling author, and the host of the Rabbi Daniel Lapin Show on San Francisco's KSFO. Rabbi Lapin studied Torah, economics, physics, and mathematics in Johannesburg, London, and Jerusalem. He was appointed to serve 2 terms on a United States commission by President George W. Bush. Rabbi Lapin was the keynote speaker at the Congressional Bipartisan Opening of the 106th Congress in Washington, D.C. His books include national bestseller America's Real War, Buried Treasure, The Secrets for Living from the Lord's Language, and Thou Shalt Prosper, the 10 Commandments for Making Money. Please welcome to the City Church and the Prosperity with a Purpose Conference, Rabbi Daniel Lapin.
Thank you very much indeed. But right now you're eating into our busy time, so sit down and let me get on with it. We got a lot of really important work to do here. This is a terrific turnout. And what a privilege for me to be here as your guest. I really appreciate it so much. And I appreciate the graciousness of your pastors, people who've become brothers, Pastors Don and Marlene, Pastor Wendell and Pastor Jenny, and of course Pastor Aaron are among those who have become very much a part of my life and that of my wife. Let's talk about a fascinating thing to me. When I started looking at natural disasters, I decided to take a list of the 20 worst natural disasters of the 20th century from the year 1900. I wanted to find out something very special. I wanted to figure out if there was any pattern to where these disasters struck. And so I made a list of the 20 disasters caused by nature, which is another way of saying caused by God. The 20 disasters that have killed the most people in the 20th century. And I was looking for a pattern. And I found the great flood of the Yangtze River in 1917 and a flood of the Chinese Yellow River. And I saw the 1935 flood of the Netherlands when the North Sea broke through the dikes and killed 1,800 Dutchmen. And I found volcanoes, a number of volcanic eruptions. I found flooding caused by hurricanes. The great hurricane of 1970, Bangladesh, 15,000 people killed. The numbers are enormous. And I looked at the entire list. Now, I really do hope that the ushers obeyed Pastor Wendell and locked the doors. Because I'm going to say something now that would be very easily misunderstood. And so I'd hate for somebody to walk out in between the time I say what I'm going to say and the time I get to explain it. So I'm watching those doors real carefully now. Okay, here we go. The pattern is, my friends, that 17 out of the 20 worst calamities of the 20th century took place in non-Christian countries. In countries where the Bible is unknown. Only 3 of them took place in countries where the Bible is known and studied and loved. Now here's where you shouldn't walk out. Because right now, I leave you thinking that God hates non-Christians or non-Jews. People who do not know the Bible of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob get washed away by monsoons and hurricanes. This is not a good time to walk out. Because that is not how it is. I will admit that I was stunned when I saw this because statistics mislead so easily. And I looked at that and I said, oh my God, this is unbelievable. God only brings big disasters to people who don't know the Bible. But then I thought, wait a second. You are a dumb rabbi. You're falling into a big trap here. Listen to the trap. I didn't bring the disasters that were biggest in natural terms. For instance, Hurricane Hugo and Hurricane Andrew, which struck the eastern coast of the United States, both of them were far larger than any of the hurricanes that killed upwards of 15,000 people in Bangladesh. So, God is an equal opportunity distributor of natural phenomenon. But here's what happens. It's what we do to prepare for them and handle them that is so different. Countries that are rooted in the Bible get inflicted with the same hurricanes, the same volcanoes, the same floods, same earthquakes. The same earthquakes. There was an earthquake in Paso Robles in California just a few years ago. Within 3 days, of an earthquake in Iran. The one in Paso Robles was slightly more powerful than the one in Iran. The one in Paso Robles killed nobody. The one in Iran killed tens of thousands. The strength of these natural disasters is the same everywhere. But the fatalities, the number of deaths, is far lower in biblical countries. That is an absolutely unavoidable fact. Now, I speak to a lot of audiences that are kind of hostile to a biblical message, and they get really antsy around about this point in the discussion. But what can you do? Facts is facts, no matter how inconvenient they are. And this is facts. Now, you've got to find some explanation for that. You know, why would that be? It's inescapable. Okay, you can leave now. Now, the second, here's another interesting fact. I took a look at all the scientific, technological, and medical advances of the 1,000 years, right, all the way up to the Second World War, to 1950. And what that included is the printing press by Johann Gutenberg in 1450. It included the discovery of medicine, penicillin. How about Novocaine? You'd like to have tooth work done by your dentist without any anesthetic? All of these things, as a matter of fact, over 98.8% of the scientific, medical, technological discoveries of the last 1,000 years took place in biblical societies. Coincidence? How can that be? It's too much. It's too much. And finally, let's also note that there are certain countries and societies in the world that created great wealth. There are societies that produced a standard of living that is the envy of the entire world, and it's been like this for several hundred years. Now, admittedly, there are other countries and other societies that pick up the ideas and apply them in exactly the same way that after World War II, Western ideas spread around the world, and so you did have scientific discoveries being produced in China and in Japan and in different parts of the world that are non-biblical. But what was happening is these were countries that were importing Western ideas following World War II. Economically, monetarily wise, the same thing is true. And this is something which has really puzzled people. For hundreds of years, this has been studied in universities, and people have grappled with the basic question, why do some countries, like England, like Sweden, like Holland, like the United States of America, produce amazingly high standards of living, creating an enormous amount of wealth? Hong Kong produces wealth. Switzerland produces wealth. And there are so many countries around the world that we disparagingly call the third world sometimes. And it's a worthwhile question to try and figure out, is there any pattern, is there anything that explains why it is that certain countries have produced wealth, whereas other countries do not? My friends, once again, it is an inescapable and admittedly inconvenient fact that the countries that produce wealth are countries that sprang from the pages of the Bible. I will tell you that virtually every attempt has been made to avoid this terrible conclusion. And I'll tell you some of the theories. One of the theories was colonialism. You want to know why England became wealthy in the 19th century, whereas India at that point was poor, and Africa, most of the African continent was poor? You know why it is? It's because the English went there, colonized it, stole all the wealth, took it back to England, made themselves wealthy, and left the other folks poor. That's the theory. Well, here's the nice a piece of information. Now with computers, all the books of the Dutch East India Company are able to be opened up. All the books of the British Colonial Office are opened up. All the calculations can now be made. Guess what? England injected far more money into its colonies than it ever took out. You want to know the proof? The proof is that when England gave up the colonies and went home, now that the colonies could keep all their own wealth, they should have grown and thrived and done wonderfully. They haven't. They became economic basket cases, because the English were no longer pumping money in. But now we have a question. If the English did not go to these colonies in order to withdraw money and extract wealth and take it back home, what on earth did they go there for? I wonder if any of you know the answer. It's easily and readily available. England went to the colonies to take the gospel to the world. That was the reason for the British colonial experiment. That's the reason. They brought biblical civilization to the whole world, and when they left, in many places, biblical civilization left with them, leaving behind tyranny, catastrophe, disaster, poverty, and misery. So we're left with the inescapable conclusion that the Bible has immense power. Immense power to change entire nations. And if the Bible can change a nation, do you know what it can do for you? Now, for those few cynics among you, well, he may say the Bible changes nations, but what do you mean? What does a book change a nation? Yes, it does, as a matter of fact, because ideas really matter. Values really matter. And the ideas that permeate a culture and suffuse the character of a nation are ideas that impact everything that happens in that nation. It's not an accident that the greatest scientists up until World War II were all religious Christians. They were all Bible believers, and many of them knew Hebrew. Sir Isaac Newton, the founder of modern physics, actually used to inscribe Hebrew notes on some of his texts in the Hebrew language. But the scientists that built Western thought were all Christians. They were Bible believers, for heaven's sake. Well, why would that help them with their science? It's very simple, I'll tell you. Wouldn't you love to meet some famous figure in history? Let's leave aside for the moment a religious figure. Let's say that you were really infatuated with the music of a fantastic musician who's no longer alive. Or you love the painting of an artist who's no longer alive. And you say to yourself, I'd give anything to get to know that person, but you can't, he's no longer alive. What's the next best thing? Get to know his work. Get to see and know what he created. All right? There is an incredible incentive. What is the second greatest thrill available to human beings? For a man to get to know a woman and a woman to get to know a man. What's the first biggest thrill? To get to know the boss. Now, it's very difficult for all of us. It's very difficult. It's a spiritual struggle to get to know God. And one of the best ways to get to know anybody is through his creation. Teachers who teach in public school often tell me, actually all kinds of schools, we know the parents of these children, although we've never met them, because we get to know the creation of the parents so well, we end up knowing the parents. And so, alone, among all the cultures of the world, alone, the only culture that identifies the creation around us with the Creator is the culture of the Bible. That is why I am sure, tap on the shoulder a 9-year-old child of probably almost anybody in the sanctuary today, or I could walk up to a little Jewish child, and I could say to a little Christian child or a little Jewish child, I could say, I want you to complete this sentence for me. Here comes the sentence. In the beginning, God... Well, that's easy. Ask me something hard. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. There is no other religious text in the world that opens with that profound statement. None whatsoever. Do you know what that statement tells you? That if you want to get to know God, you need to get to know heaven and earth. In other words, study this world, study this planet, study everything there is to know about this world. I've just described to you the study of science, haven't I? If you want to get to know this world, you need to study it. There's earth science, there's mineral science, there's astrophysics, there's chemistry, there's biology. There's all kinds of ways of different angles of getting to know this world. And in all of those things, you are getting closer to knowing God. Pardon me. And that is why it is that, without exception, all the great scientists were driven by their desire to know God. So is it any surprise now for me when I tell you that biblical civilizations developed most of the inventions on the planet? Of course not. They were motivated. They were motivated. They were trying to achieve the greatest thrill known to human beings, which is to get to know God a little better. And the avenue to do that is simple. The avenue to do that is to get to know His creation, the world. And so that's one way in which the fact that the Bible was the singular, most influential force in all of Western civilization. And by the way, we are now in the first generation in all of Western history, the first generation, I tell you, that acknowledges a person to be educated, although he is an ignoramus about the Bible. That's never happened before in Western civilization. And that is why it is. I don't know if you've noticed, but on the crest of Yale University is Hebrew writing. That's because Yale University used to insist on people studying Hebrew. If you wanted to graduate, they didn't care what you were studying, literature, science, whatever you study. How can you be educated if you don't know the Bible? And ideally, know it in the Lord's language. And so William Bradford, second governor of the Plymouth colony, wrote the first 20 pages of his History of the Plymouth Plantation in Hebrew. And Ezra Stiles, the president of Yale University, had a very close friend, a rabbi, who, see, everybody needs a rabbi, right? It's okay, the pastor said so. So, oh, and by the way, for you folks, that would be me. All right. Pastor Aaron, is something wrong? I wouldn't start up with you. I just want to make sure. So, Harvard University, also, all Hebrew, because they understood that the Bible shaped Western civilization. The printing press was the biggest discovery. It was bigger in its day than the internet is in our day. When Gutenberg came up with the printing press, he sat down to think, now, this is a historic moment. What should be the very first book in the history of the world that is going to be printed? He said, well, how about the Vienna telephone book? No. The Bible. It wasn't a question. This is the first generation where people who are ignorant of the Bible still think they know something. It's never happened before. And that is how it is that science thrived and grew among the people of the Bible. That's why it was like that. And natural calamities didn't hurt as much the people of the Bible. You know why? Because there are rules in the Bible about how to do a building. There is a rule that you have to create a building in a way that it doesn't run the risk of hurting anybody. Thou shalt build a parapet around thy roof, so that if anybody finds their way to the roof, they cannot fall off. These are the beginnings of the concept of building codes. Do you know why the earthquake in Paso Robles killed nobody and the earthquake in Iran killed tens of thousands? Because they do not have building codes outside biblical civilizations, or smart civilizations that have picked up on biblical concepts. And I think of countries who at the time of World War II, think of Taiwan, or think of South Korea. At the time of World War II, these were economically non-existent, nothing. They picked up on the West. Today, South Korea is predominantly a Christian nation. Is it any wonder that it has become the tiger of Asia? The Bible is what makes this possible. And I want you to really understand that, because we're going to now move into understanding some of these biblical principles, and you've got to know and see that this is the core, and this is the secret. I'll tell you something fascinating that happened in May 1953. A man called Edmund Hillary climbed Mount Everest with Tenza Sherping Tenza Norgay for the very first time humans had ever climbed to the top of Mount Everest. Do you have any idea how many people climbed Mount Everest last summer? Do you think 1, 10, or 100? More than 100. So much so that trash is becoming, there's a littering problem on Everest right now. It's chocolate wrappers, candy wrappers. Well, wait a sec. If it's so easy, and by the way, I'm not saying it's that easy, I'm not saying I could do it, but, now wait a second. There are many business professionals, people who drive desks 365 days a year in Seattle, who have climbed Mount Everest. They've gone with a Seattle guide called Ed Vistas. And Ed has a business of taking people up Mount Everest, and he brings everybody back home safely again. He's an expert, and he puts you through a training regimen. But excuse me, it's just not that big a deal anymore. It costs some money, serious money. Costs you $50,000 to pull it off. But wait a second, why did we make such a fuss of Edmund Hillary and Sherping Tenza Norgay? Well, it's very simple, you see. They didn't know that it could be done. When you know something can be done, you can do it. Exactly 1 year later, it was May 1954, Roger Bannister was a medical student in England, did something nobody had ever done before in the history of the world. He ran a mile in under 4 minutes. Doctors, right? It was last night, Pastor Wendell had said, you don't have to listen to doctors all the time. Listen to doctors, but believe in God. Doctors said that anybody who ran the mile in 4 minutes would die. And so Roger Bannister broke through the tape in 3:59, and he fell down on the grass, panting, and the television newscaster said, well, there it is, he's dead. No, he's not dead. He's very much alive. Very much alive. He's a very fine heart specialist, still very active. He's okay. Do you have any idea how many people ran a mile in under 4 minutes in the year 1955? 1 year after Roger Bannister did it. 1, 10, more than 100. Well, wait a sec. If you guys are such great runners, and you ran the mile in under 4 minutes anyway in 1955, why didn't you do it 2 years earlier? That way you could have been historic. Oh, it's very simple. We didn't know it could be done. Anybody can do something after you know it can be done. It takes somebody very special to be able to do something before you know it can be done. That is called faith. And so you've got to see that the Bible has brought prosperity wherever it has been. Everywhere it has been. Today, the continent of Africa suffers, with only one exception, pockets of evangelical Christianity, Bible-based. That's where there are pockets of prosperity. That's where it is. South America, not doing well, excepting for pockets of biblically based prosperity. It works. It works. It works. We spoke a little earlier. Pastor Wendell was extraordinarily gracious about my book, Thou Shalt Prosper. I deeply appreciated it, and it was a very emotional moment for me because it was like a baby. That was a book I worked on for 20 years. And I knew that it was a book that would have to be written by a Jew. Because in it I was going to say certain things that had the book been written by anybody who was not Jewish, the book would have been dismissed as bigoted and anti-Semitic. And this way, since it was I who wrote it, what a anti-Semitic rabbi. Sometimes the truth is difficult to take. And one of the basic challenges, again, I like anomalies, whether it's strange coincidences. Why is it that countries that are biblically based do not suffer from natural disasters? Why is it that countries that are biblically based produce scientific discoveries? Why is it that countries that are biblically based create wealth and produce riches? And why is it, I ask myself, that Jews are so disproportionately good with money? You can see why that had to be a question only I could ask. Why are Jews disproportionately good with money? Well, one possibility is they rip people off all the time. I had to look into that possibility. If I'm going to study this from the point of view of scientific economics, I had to be open to that possibility. I hoped it wasn't true. But I was given a little bit of a clue because the Oxford English Dictionary for the word Jew says verb to rip people off. So I thought maybe, maybe. But I discovered too many good Christian business professionals around the country who had had long-standing business relationships with Jews going back decades. If people rip you off, you don't keep doing business with them. That's why reputation is all that matters, really. Who you are. And there again is another biblical principle. We all know the verse about a good name. That's important for business. So if you are part of a culture that does not emphasize the importance of a good name, then you are at a disadvantage when it comes to trying to do business. Very difficult. Well, it was too clear that could not be the explanation. Were there some Jewish crooks to be found? Yeah, sure. Just like there were crooks of every possible kind. Yes, absolutely. But no more, no less than anywhere else. And generally speaking, in the world of business, crookedness gets spotted pretty quickly. I wish the same could be true in the world of the universities or in the world of politics, where there is no self-correcting mechanism. But in business, it self-corrects. The word goes around really quickly who you should stay away from. So I looked at that possibility, and that didn't seem to be an explanation. And I looked at other possibilities. I looked at the idea that Jews constitute this one big unified club of individuals who constantly devote themselves to one another's needs and take care of advancing one another's interests. And sure, you would thrive if you were part of a big group of people that everyone cared for everybody else, and that's one of the beauties of a church family. Well, if that were true, yes, In Judaism, however, this will probably shock you to hear, but many synagogues and temples are seething cauldrons of political intrigue. Not everybody in the Jewish community loves everybody else. Sadly, but true. And I looked at other possibilities. I looked at the possibility of intelligence. Maybe Jews are super intelligent. Well, I didn't even have to do any measurements, because I discovered something else, and that is superintelligence is a handicap for making money. How many really successful university professors do you know? Really smart people, really smart people often end up on the faculties of universities, and they are notoriously bad with money. And I discovered a very simple fact, and that is the old bell curve. The Forrest Gump story from the movie, just a movie. In the real world, if you are truly below functional level of intelligence, you're just not going to make it. Really low, you're not going to become a tycoon. It's just as true on the other end. If you're really smart, you're not going to make it either. You know why? Because nobody likes a smart guy. And you succeed in business when people know you, like you, and trust you. People who are a little too smart for their own good doesn't go well for them. So for all the normal folks like us in the middle of that bell curve, just normal folks in that big broad range of normality, we do just fine. Which is probably a good time for us to analyze who here with us today is in business. I don't understand. I still see some hands down. Oh, excuse me, ma'am, you didn't have your hand up. Are you by any chance a justice on the United States Supreme Court? No? Because that's about the only person I can think of who's not in business. Everybody's in business. If you are trying to become more prosperous, then how do you think you'll do it if you're not in business? Well, wait a second. You don't understand. I'm not in business. I'm a machinist for the Boeing company. What do you mean business? I have a job. I'm not in business. You don't understand. You are in business just like Starbucks of Howard Schultz is in business. The only difference is that Starbucks has millions of customers for their product. They're in the coffee business with millions of customers. You are in the machinist business, and it so happens you've organized your life so you have one customer. That's all it is. You have one customer called Boeing. That's all. And in the same way that Starbucks can raise the price of a cup of coffee, and they've got to do that very carefully, because if they do it too much, their customers will walk away. In the same way, I can go to Boeing and say, look, I'm a terrific machinist. I'm raising the price of what I supply you with. I'm in business. And they say, oh, you mean you're asking for a raise? And I say, well, you can call it what you like, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm raising my prices. Right? And they'll say either yes or no, just like customers at Starbucks will say either yes or no. You are in business, whatever you do. What is a business? Let's define that. It's really easy. Books are written on what defines a business. You really don't need a book. What defines a business is so simple. A business is anything that has a customer. You can show me the most sophisticated business plan you like. And you can show me you've got a factory and it's going to produce this, and you've got tools and you've got workers and you've got everything. I only have one question, which is who's buying the stuff? And if you cannot answer that, if you say, well, we're going to look at that 2 years into the project, we're going to examine the market. No, I'm not interested. But if, on the other hand, you came to me and you said, I've got this terrific thing that everybody needs. I just don't know how to build a factory and I don't know how to market it. Oh, that's no problem. We'll find people who can do that. You got the customers. Okay, now, why does it work that way? Well, I want you to think for a moment about what happens in the ideal sense, and I look at America as the country that is today most significantly and most clearly built on the Bible, more than any other country. And I look at certain companies in America as adhering firmly to those principles in one way or another, even sometimes they may not mean it. Take, for instance, a company called Nordstrom, based right here in the Northwest. They started as a shoe store. Now, I find this really interesting because what happens when you walk in to a shoe store? If it's a good shoe store, I walk into the shoe store and somebody says, can I help you? And I say, yes, I'm looking for those sneakers with red lights in the back that flash when you walk. And the person says, no problem, why don't you sit down right over here? I sit down over there, and you know what the person then does? Goes down on his knees in front of me, takes my shoes off. Does he feel menial doing that? He seems to feel proud of his professionalism. He feels to be proud of him doing something which we all recognize to be an ultimate of something called customer service. And what did Pastor Ginny lead us in? A worship? What a coincidence! Same word for customer service and worship service. How can that be? It's very simple. It's very simple. What is the greatest delight for a parent as your children start growing up? If you're blessed with more than one child, and the children start growing up, and you go through all that period where they're bickering and squabbling with each other all the time, and every dinner table is a fight. He said this, he pushed me first, he took my carrot, and you think it rings a bell, doesn't it? And you think this hell is never going to end. And then at a certain magical moment, in some families, it's like when the kids turn 40. But in most cases, in many cases, it's a little earlier, they suddenly start acting like brothers and sisters. And you and your spouse sit back and you say, praise be the Lord. What a delight it is to see them caring for one another. My oldest daughter has 3 little boys under the age of 4, and she was expecting some people for a dinner party, and she had everything worked out. She came down with a really bad flu, and she had people expected for dinner, and she has little kids to deal with, and she just didn't know what to do. And she called my wife, Susan, and she's on the other side of the country. We wish we could help. And I said, all right, we'll call you back if we can think of something. And 15 minutes later, we called back, and she's sounding much better. We said, are you cured? She says, no, I feel awful, but everything is going to be all right. I said, why is that? She said, oh, Miriam is already on a Greyhound bus coming to our home. She's going to be taking care of everything for a day or two. Miriam is my number 4 daughter, number 5 daughter, I'm sorry, who is at college, and she's a very devoted student. She's at a Bible college on the East Coast, and she doesn't like missing class. She won't miss class for vacation. She won't miss class for anything at all, but her sister called with a need. And she dropped everything and ran to the bus station to take a bus to her older sister to take care of the house. And Susan and I just looked at one another with a tear in each eye. What a blessing. Your children take care of one another. Do you have any idea what it feels like to our Father in heaven to see us taking care of one another? You get some clue. Do you know what customer service is? It's taking care of one another. That's what it is. That's the idea. And we have to really understand what that's all about. Taking care of one another. We go to the very beginning of the Bible, and God appears to be in an awfully good mood. He creates one thing after another. Well, he is. I mean, look at this. Whatever he creates, he looks and he says, and God saw that it was good. God says, yeah, I like that. I mean, created France. That's good too. I mean, everything is good. Right? Remarkably. Whatever he creates is good. And then 7 times we see that things that God creates are good. There's an 8th time that God says, and this was good. And I'll tell you what that is in just a moment. But first I'll tell you about when God gets grumpy. What's the first time God says, no, it isn't good? It's not good for man to be alone. And so many of us think that that just is an introduction to the idea of marriage. And it is that, but it's not only that. It is a blueprint for all of human survival. It's a blueprint for all of human survival. Not good for man to be alone. I want to ask you to imagine something unimaginable. Imagine that some horrible calamity took away every single human being on, let's say, in the United States or the world, leaving just you. Now, I know what your first sensation is. You're saying, what's so bad? I'll get a parking place in downtown Bellevue. I know what you're thinking. But when you get past that initial euphoria, I want you to try and imagine what life is like when you are indeed all alone. Not good for man to be alone. Let me prove it to you. If you disagree, I want you to tell me. I don't want anybody buying what I'm saying just because I'm a rabbi. It's not a bad reason, but it's not the only reason. It's got to make sense. So I want you to bear with me as we do what Albert Einstein used to call a thought experiment, because it would be very cruel to actually conduct this experiment in reality. So we're just going to think our way through it. There you are, all alone. And you come home and you say to yourself, phew, at last I get the TV remote. Click, click, click. And you look at the TV screen and what do you see? Nothing, because there's nobody operating the stations. Well, you think, you know what, I've been waiting for a long time to read a good book anyway. You open the book, you settle back and the sun goes down, you flick on the light switch, and what do you get? No light. No problem, you say, I'll go for a drive. And you go driving, and sooner or later, you discover that your Chevy is out of gas. So you stop at a gas station. What do you discover? Well, you see, gas stations need electricity to pump gas from the underground tanks into your car. No gas. Okay, no problem. Just pop into the nearest BMW, because since you're the only person left, everything belongs to you, so there's no difficulty there. And you decide it's time for dinner, off to a nearby restaurant. You're on your way to the restaurant, you suddenly realize, that's silly, nobody is going to serve me in the restaurant, nobody's there to make the food. I'll just go to a supermarket. No problem, it belongs to you, everything belongs to you now. You go to the supermarket, and you get yourself some food. For how long will you be able to do that before even the cans begin to bulge? So pretty soon, you're going to arrive at a point where you realize that you'd better plant something in God's ground and pray to heaven on high that the produce will come out before you starve to death. In other words, you are now, being the only person on the planet, you are obviously the richest person in all of human history. You own everything. You're like Adam. You own everything. And you are about to starve like a subsistence peasant in the poorest third world nation. You know why? Because you didn't listen to the words, it's not good for man to be alone. When you are alone, you starve to death. The only reason you have everything you have at the click of a mouse. Do you know what genius this is? Do you know what a blessing of God this is? That I can go home and I can click on a mouse on my computer and FedEx brings something to my house tomorrow morning, whatever I want? Why is that? That's because we are a biblical civilization that says not good for man to be alone. And so we come right away to the story of Cain and Abel. And Cain says to Abel, they were in the field. And Cain says to Abel, what does he say? Well, actually, if you take a look in your verse when you get home, it doesn't say. And then the next thing is that Cain kills Abel. I'd love to know what that conversation was about. It was an argument about baseball scores. I mean, what happened there? That is why we need Rabbi. Because there's something called ancient Jewish wisdom that was encapsulated through generations, from Moses to Joshua and from Joshua to the elders. And the instruction was always, never write it down. Always communicate it from mouth to ear, from teacher to student, from parent to child. Because when it's communicated that way, people hear it and learn it. Whenever I speak at universities, as soon as I start talking, people pull out notebooks and start writing. I say, wait a second, stop that! If I wanted you to write it down, I'd have supplied you with the notes. I know what I'm saying. I'll write it down for you and I'll duplicate it and give you notes. This is a magical experience of human communication, of a kind that God bestowed upon us through the miracle of speech. That's how we need to communicate. Don't write it down. The minute you write it down, you're limiting it. It's got to remain as an idea that moves from one soul to another soul. And that's the idea of what we call the Oral Torah. And that's why, as Pastor Wendell mentioned, my CD programs, those are on audio CD, particularly for that reason, because it is a magical soul experience. Studying Bible has to be oral. There has to be a teacher and a student. That's why you have Bible class. You come here, the pastor sits down with you, you work through it. You don't just stay at home and read it by yourself. That's a good start. You have to read the Bible every day. But this act of studying needs another human being. That's why I'd recommend to you, if for some reason or another you are not able to attend a regular Bible study program at the church, and you really ought to be doing that, then at the very least, get together with a friend rather than just be by yourself. Even with just a friend, sit down and say, let's do half a chapter a day. That's all. Let's just do that. But at least there are two human beings interacting with one another, and that's how that works. So there's a lot of the material that is not written down or is hinted at in the Hebrew text. And so I'm able to share with you what Cain really said to Abel. And as soon as I tell you, you'll see that it's perfectly obvious. And that is, Adam is getting old. What do you think is on Cain's mind? Remember, I just told you, the richest person in all of human history was Adam because he owned the whole world. What do you think Cain wanted to talk to Abel about? Inheritance. And so he caught up with Abel in the field and he spoke to him and he said, Dad hasn't made a will or anything, so it's going to be up to you and me to decide how to divide up the world. And I just thought that I would let you know that my plan was to take everything, because I'm the older son. You may be my tenant. You can pay me rent. Abel says back to Cain, my dear brother, a little bit of a misunderstanding you have there. We're actually going to be splitting the world in two. We're two sons, and what's more, I'll be taking North America. So, I just put that part in. So, Cain does what he has to do, which is kill Abel. Why does he have to do it? Because here you need to know the meaning of names in the Hebrew. There is no name in the Bible that's like Agatha. Every name has a meaning, a very specific and important meaning. And the meaning is essential to the story because the Bible, and I don't have to tell this to you, you hear this from your pastors and your teachers all the time. The Bible is not a book of ancient legends and historic anecdotes and figures. The Bible is a blueprint to life and a pathway to prosperity. It needs to be studied like a textbook, like a data stream of the most crucial intelligence imaginable. That's what it is. So it's obviously very important that Cain's name in Hebrew, Cain, means to acquire, to get me. That's his entire existence, his ownership of things. Now, it's something he desperately wants to do. That's his whole life. And so obviously, the most important thing for him is, my whole existence, my identity of who I am goes away if anybody else owns anything. I want everything. And Abel, his brother, says, half and half. Cain says, well, I'm sorry, my whole identity is at stake here. You have to go. And he kills him. God comes to him and says, where's the famous word, the famous question, where's your brother? Am I my brother's keeper? And so on. And then what happens next? God punishes Cain. How? Not one punishment, but actually two. The two punishments are, number one, you will be a wanderer always. You will never be able to be in one place. Number two, nothing you plant will ever grow. What's the message? When God administers justice, it's perfect justice. We always have to see the punishment fit the crime. How does that punishment fit the crime? It's very simple. Cain thought that the secret to wealth was getting rid of other people. Cain thought, the less of you, the more there is for me. It's an easy mistake, isn't it? Where people will sometimes say, we don't want any more people moving into our neighborhood. No new people. It's crowded enough as it is. Let me ask you something. Which is more crowded, Hong Kong or Somalia? Hong Kong by a long shot. Which is more prosperous, Hong Kong or Somalia? Hong Kong. People are our wealth. They don't take it away. Cain was of the opinion that people means less for you. And he intended, by killing Abel, he intended to keep all the land for himself. God says, I'm going to show you what your land is worth. You're right. You've now got it all for yourself. Here's what it's worth. What do you use land for? There are only two uses for land, agriculture and development. Now, we've got some agricultural people in the audience. We've got some land developers in the audience. You guys know what land is for. Look what God says to Cain. What do you think you're going to do with your land? Number one, you have to keep moving. You'll never be in one place long enough to put up a building and find tenants. Number two, if you think you'll ever plant anything, that's not going to work either. So the two uses that land has are denied to you. Because you missed the point that wealth is other people. It's not getting rid of other people. It's finding ways to serve other people. That's the way to wealth. So Cain finally gets this. And his atonement to God is twofold. The first thing is, he immediately has a baby. He says, I understand. It's bringing new life into the world that produces wealth. I understand. And that's why the next thing you read is, Cain brought a baby into the world. And then what did he do? He built a city, the first city in the world. Why did Cain build a city? To reassure God that he did get the message. That in reality, he now understands that a lot of people around one another produces goodness for everybody, provided they're biblical. If they're not biblical, a lot of people around one another can produce a crime-infested, disease-ridden hellhole. But if you get a lot of biblical people together in tight proximity with one another, it's a good life. Because they're able to interact with one another. And so Cain starts a city, and that's our introduction to the whole idea. Well, we do understand then that it's our involvement with other people. The world that God created is not a world where it's good to be alone. It's not just married. It's that people alone don't thrive. They don't do well. What do we call solitary confinement? For those of you with very busy lives, solitary confinement sounds like not a bad idea for a little while. But it quickly turns into what it is, which is torture. It's not a good thing. Being alone makes people go mad. Does the name Ted Kaczynski mean anything to you? The Unabomber lived by himself, a hermit on a shack on the mountainside in Montana. Went nuts. If you are without other people, it's very, very bad. And if you have tight and close relationships with other people, it can be very, very good. That is the message we've got here. Let me ask you a question which, again, do not leave before I've had an opportunity to discuss this a little further. Well, I'll wait till whoever's going to leave is going to leave before I even ask you the question. Okay, here's the question. Do you think God wants us to have great sex? I don't know for sure, but I don't think so. Now, before you think to yourself, that's one repressed rabbi, man. I'll explain what I mean. I don't think so. I could be wrong. But here's what I do think. I think God wants a man to marry a woman, and for the two of them to be utterly devoted to one another forever and to their family. And it shouldn't surprise us if in that environment God rewards that couple with the greatest sensual pleasure He's made available to human beings. You see, there's a difference. I'm not saying that He wants us to have good sex. That's the reward. That's the consequence of doing the right thing. And you don't need me to tell you the figures that everybody knows, which is that Bible-believing religious Americans do have more fulfilling lives. People know that. There's a reason for it, because the reward is for doing what God wants us to do. Which brings me to the next question. Do you think God wants us to be rich? I don't think so. Could be wrong, but I don't think so. It doesn't fit everything I have been taught by my teachers and my father, who were taught by his father, who were taught by his, and I don't think they lied to me. They said, no, God doesn't want you to be rich. That would be a prosperity theology which somehow belies the reality that we see with our own eyes. That's not how it works. But what does God want? Oh, it's very simple. God wants us to all be obsessively preoccupied with other people's needs in an environment of honesty and transparency. And would you be surprised if a loving God rewards us with the great blessing of prosperity under those circumstances? You've got to understand that is how wealth is created, by serving other people. You've got to see it. Let me tell you the story of Great-Grandpa Lapin. Great-Grandpa Lapin was a very good practitioner of a noble profession called selling. He was a salesman. As a matter of fact, that might be a little bit too high a term for what he was. He was actually a peddler. Do you know what a peddler is? He has a cart. And Great-Grandpa Lapin used to go from town to town with his horse cart, and he would trade. Let me give you an idea of how things worked with Great-Grandpa Lapin. This would be an example, and I'm compressing it. We're going to make this quick because we've got to move right along. Great-Grandpa Lapin arrives in town and knocks on the first door. Okay, arrives there, lady opens the door. He says, hi, you folks got anything at all that you don't need, you want to get rid of, anything you'd like to sell? She says, well, to tell you the truth, there's this old dining room table that's down in our basement. We're getting rid of it because we bought a new one. He said, how are you getting rid of it? She said, the city's coming by to pick it up on Tuesday. He said, for free? She said, oh no, the city's going to charge us $5 to pick up the table. Great-Grandpa Lapin says, how'd it be if I gave you $5 and took away the table? She says, you kidding? He says, yeah, no problem. She says, I'll even help you load it on your wagon. Okay, they load the table on the wagon. Now let's just do a little biblical arithmetic here with me, will you? I want you to just do a little balance sheet work here. How much better off is that lady because Great-Grandpa Lapin knocked on her door? Like that, right? Not 5, 10. Because she was going to have to pay out 5, which she now can keep, and she gets another 5. So she's up by $10. Great-Grandpa Lapin stops at a hardware store, spends $1 on some paint and some nails, gives the table a coat of paint, puts a nail in a shaky leg, knocks on another door. Now, in reality, he knocked on lots and lots and lots of doors, okay? But we're going to just move this along, because if I spent 6 hours showing you how this went, you'd probably walk out. So Great-Grandpa Lapin goes to the next door, knocks on the door, and the lady opens and says, hi, anybody here want a table? She says, funny you should ask. I've got a daughter just getting married, and my daughter is looking for a table. They call their daughter up. She comes and takes a look. She says, well, we were actually going to go to Ethan Allen furniture showrooms, but they were very expensive. Yeah, we could buy this table. This would be great. How much is it? Great-Grandpa Lapin says, well, just a matter of interest. What were you thinking of spending over at the showroom? And the girl says, well, we've been looking at tables for $20. Great-grandpa Lapin says, tell you what, you could have this one for 10. She says, really? He says, yeah, but mind that, the leg's a bit shaky. I put a nail in. There's a fresh coat of paint, but underneath that it's a bit scratched. She says, no problem. This will be a very nice starter table. And they load it into the house. How much better, with some arithmetic now, a little balance sheet arithmetic, how much better off is the second family because great-grandpa Lapin knocked on their door? $10, right? They've still got the table, and now they're not out $20 for a table, they're only out $10, so they got $10 sitting there. So in aggregate, taken together, these two families in the village are better off by how much for great-grandpa Lapin's coming through town? $20. Each family's better off by 10, total of $20. Don't forget, that's not the end of the good. Great-grandpa Lapin has how much in his pocket? There's an arbitrage there of how much? 4. Remember, he spent 1 at the hardware store. So now the hardware store's happy great-grandpa Lapin came to town also. How about the hotel where great-grandpa Lapin's sleeping tonight? They're happy he's in town also. It's no wonder that towns used to enjoy the journey of a peddler through town because everybody was better off at the end of the day. Now, I know that some of you are thinking to yourselves, this is smoke and mirrors. We can't tell where he's pulled the fast one, but you don't just make money like that. Yes, that is exactly how you make money, by doing things for other people. And if you shouldn't believe me, and there just might be 1 or 2 lingering cynics out there, I will prove it to you. There is one ultimately most successful website on the entire internet that made money from day one. It's called eBay. Shall I give you the best definition of eBay? The best definition of eBay is 70,000 great-grandpa Lapins working at the same time. That's all it is. That's all eBay does. Exactly what great-grandpa Lapin does. Find something this person wants to sell, find something this person wants to buy, makes the connection, and keeps something in their pocket along the way. That's the system. When you are focused on doing things for other people, you are being rewarded with God's gift of prosperity. That is the whole idea. And the system shapes itself. The beauty of what God has given to us is a system that monitors you and gives you a scorecard at the end of every day. It's a scorecard because it tells you whether you are doing the things you ought to be doing. Let me give you an example. My mother used to say to me, I want you to be happy. And I used to say to her, that's easy, buy me a motorcycle. And she said, you don't understand. Your happiness is not my responsibility, it's yours. So what are you talking about? She'd say, look in the Bible. And the Bible says in the Hebrew, v'samachta, you shall be happy. It doesn't say find people to make you happy. It doesn't say find people who will give you the things you want so you will be happy. It says be happy. That is a decision you make. It's not a consequence of anything else. Now, think about this. You've got a choice about who you're going to buy something from. Who do you want to buy it from? Wouldn't you want to buy it from somebody you know? Haven't you heard advertisements from companies that say, you got a friend in the car business or the jewelry business? You got a friend in the business. Because everybody understands that we like doing business with people we know. We like doing business with people we like. It's not just that we know them, we have to like them. And we have to trust them. And so, if your business, whatever it is, I call it a business, but you understand what I was saying before. Whatever you are doing for your avenue to prosperity is a business. And that means that you need to let people know you. They must like you. Well, how do they get to like you? You know what? Here's one of the surest ways to make sure people don't like you. To be a whiner, grumbler, complainer, negative, pessimistic, grouch. That is the surest way to make sure nobody, and let me tell you, if you find people avoiding your company, that's the first guess. It's not body odor. First guess. I'm telling you, much more aggravating than body odor is complaining, whining, negative, pessimistic people. If you're like that, people not only are avoiding you, they are right to avoid you, because you are polluting the atmosphere. Got to be happy. It's a decision. And so, not good for man to be alone. So step number one is, you've got to get to know lots and lots of people. And that's why you are expected, it's a biblical value, to be the first to greet somebody. Say howdy to somebody. Hey, I'm so-and-so. That's the beginning of a relationship. And it happens best in church surroundings. It happens best in prosperity conferences like this. It doesn't happen best in business advancement meetings where everyone meets the first Wednesday of a month for breakfast, exchanges business cards, because that's self-interest. The only reason you're there is because you're viewing every human being as what they can do for you. Wrong. Pastor Wendell was so emphatic about this last night. You have to deliver first. You've got to be there. What can you do for other people? How can you serve them? That's the question. How can you show that you are obsessively preoccupied with other people? And you have to make certain that people know what it is you can do for them. That's one of the reasons that we used to have names that proudly advertised what we did. I don't know how far back you have to go in Pastor Wendell's family to find the Smith, but that's certainly what he was originally. He was a smith, and his name was Smith. So that way people knew when they needed some iron work, they needed shoes for their horses, Smith is the guy you go to. Do we have any bakers in the audience? Mr. or Mrs. Baker, Miss Baker? Okay, well, you know what your ancestor was. Goldsmith, silversmith. There are so many last names that used to reflect a profession, because it is a worthy and wonderful thing to tell people how you can help them. And that's why it is when you sit on a plane and somebody next to you says, what do you do for a living? It's not a selfish question. They're saying, what do you do for human beings? How do you help humanity is what the real question is. What do you do for other human beings? That's the question. Now, a lot of people will tell you that what you need to do is, young people, sometimes high school, college students, they'll say, people told me I must find what my passion is, and I should do that professionally. Wrong. That's selfish. My passion is conducting an orchestra. Funny thing is, nobody really wants to hire me to do that. Who cares what my passion is? God doesn't. God cares whether I am infatuated with finding other people's needs, not mine. So no, do not seek as a job or as a profession that which you are excited about. Find what people need and make yourself excited about that. And so I'm not cynical about things like advertising and market research. I don't think these are bad things. I don't think advertising is capable of changing people's minds and making them forget their interests and buy things they don't really need. I have more respect for people than that. People are usually pretty savvy about their own interests. Advertising is simply a way of telling people what you can do for them. Market research, that's just a way of finding out what you can do for other people. What do they need? What do they want? I want to help you. I want to serve you. And we're all engaged in that. So we find out what we can do. We tell people what it is. We try and meet a lot of other people in a giving environment, not in a selfish environment. We try and do it in a giving environment. And we have to be cheerful and happy because the Bible says so. Don't be surprised if people flock to you when you're cheerful and happy. That's how this all comes together. And we have to understand that it's all one consistent pattern. When God says, and God saw this was good, and God saw this was good, and this was good, 7 times it was good, and the 8th time God says something is good is gold. Right there, beginning in Genesis. And the gold of that land was good. And what land are we talking about? It's not a geographic land. It's a state of mind, the gold that is created when people obey the rule of not good for man to be alone. Because that's how gold is created. When people are involved with one another and care for one another and are obsessively preoccupied with the needs that we each have, trying to solve one another's problems, that is the model of God's economy. That's what brings us onto the path of prosperity. And that's why it is that if you've ever wondered about this bizarre business that Joseph puts his brothers through, a quick 30-second recap there. The brothers wait by the side of the way. Their younger brother Joseph's getting them really irritated. He comes down the road and they decide to get rid of him. And they're going to kill him. And one of the brothers then says something very significant. In Hebrew he says, Ma betza ki naharog et achinu. Translated accurately, what profit is there in killing our brother? Let's sell him to these traders passing by. So they yank Joseph out of the pit, they sell him to the traders. Do you understand what they're saying? Relationships are to be used to make money. What profit? Here's a brother. Killing him doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? Let's sell him. That'll work. And then later on, Joseph rises to become master of all Egypt, and the brothers show up. And he sends them back with the money they came to purchase grain with. They go home with the grain, and the money is in the bags. What is the message Joseph is giving his brothers? He's not trying to just torment them. He's not trying to get revenge on them. He's trying to teach them God's basic road to prosperity. And it's not about the money, brothers. It's about the relationships. Don't you get it? Your mistake was thinking that the relationships can be sacrificed for the money. No. Cherish the relationships. That's what will produce the money. And he sends the brothers back with the money. And they're all terrified. They're all frightened that they're being set up and they're going to be accused of robbery. And this turns into a whole mess until finally Father Jacob says to them, I need you to go back. We need more food. Egypt's the only place that has food because of this genius Joseph. And the brothers say, what shall we take? We'll get gold, we'll get silver, we'll take all the original money, and the extra money will... And Father Jacob began to get a glimmer of insight. And he said, no, he's telling you something, you boys. He's trying to tell you the money comes second. It's what you're doing for other people that comes first. It's the relationship. Here's what I want you to take. A bunch of nuts and raisins and some honey and some cookies. Just a little plate of nice things. That's all you need to take. And sure enough, they listen to their father. They go back to Egypt with this ridiculous little plate that costs about 30 cents worth of cookies and nuts. And they put it on the table for Joseph. And he breaks down and says, I am Joseph, your brother. Is our father still alive? Because he catches, finally, the boys are getting it. It's not the money. I want something, don't buy me an expensive gift. Take a piece of paper and write a personal note to me that comes from your heart. Don't bring me the money. Give me that little plate with some honey and some nuts and some raisins. I want to know that we are two souls communicating. The money will come after that. And that's how it works. You see, the most important point to get clear is that it is the relationships that produce the wealth. It's caring for the other people. It's doing what Pastor Wendell said last night, which is you have to be the first to put out. And that's why the whole issue of charitable giving and tithing is so fundamental to this. And he put it so perfectly last night. The pastor said, it's a percentage. That's exactly right. It is. Looked at another way, we are very fortunate. Our boss in heaven allows us to work for a commission of 90%. I've been a salesman in my time. I never got paid a 90% commission. 10% was more like it. What a boss we got! He keeps 10% and gives us the bulk of it. We get to keep 90%. And Pastor Wendell said last night that you don't give charity, right? You don't give it. Yeah, that's right. You don't give it because it isn't yours. You pay it. I mean, it's just something you've got to pay. It's not yours. Now what you have left, now you're entitled to do what you like with that. And why should you give? You should give because the whole challenge here is to build relationships with other human beings. It's almost as if there is a titanium reinforced brick wall surrounding you when you come into this world, alone. And your job now is to make relationships with other human beings, because if you don't, you'll die. You'll starve. Let alone have no pleasure in life. How do you do that? Well, there's one way of punching money channels through this brick concrete wall. I mean, it would be nice if the money channels got punched through from the outside to the inside. It would be great if somebody out there cared enough about me to start punching through and pushing money at me. It doesn't work like that in the real world. But there's another way to punch a money channel through, and that's from the inside out. It's called giving. So you take your gift. Right, you did it last night. You're walking around throwing out $100 bills. That was a selfish act. You said so. He was punching money channels through. You give something away, you're punching a channel through that concrete barrier. And once that channel is open, now money can flow both ways through that channel. And that's why there is nobody here. I defy you to come up afterwards and tell me I'm lying. There is nobody here who has not been blessed financially more by giving money away. The Hebrew word, and here we have to come in for a landing, the Hebrew word for tithing is ma'aser. Aser. The Hebrew word for wealth is osher. Do you hear the same word except one has an S sound, one has an SH sound? Oser, charity. Osher, wealth. Same word in Hebrew, and that's one of the ways we get this clue. By the way, that SSH same word is because in Hebrew it's one letter for either S or SH. That's why, for example, the place that Melchizedek lived, he was the high priest, and he came to I'm pronouncing it Melchizedek. I'm pronouncing it with a Hebrew, and it's not how most people are accustomed to the name. But you know who I mean, right? High priest Melchizedek comes out. He was the high priest of a place called Salem. That's why there are 19 cities in America called Salem, because this is a biblical civilization. In Hebrew, the word is shalem, same as the word shalom, peace. Shalem, totality. Salem, Shalem, exactly the same word. It doesn't matter. Shabbat is Sabbath. Shabbat is Sabbath. The English name Suzanne. Any Suzannes in the audience? The English name Suzanne, in Hebrew, Shoshana. And so you can hear, as soon as you take the SH and turn it into an S, you've got exactly the same word, the same name. And so that is the concept. Charity, wealth, exactly the same. You give money away, you're punching money channels through the concrete, obviously it comes back at you. That's how it works. And you're showing again that you are putting out first. Pastor Wendell said last night, people say, well, first make me rich, and then I'll give charity. Doesn't work like that. Nothing works like that. In business, if you start a business, who has to be trusting? The buyer or the seller? The seller, the guy who wants to sell something, has to extend the credit. He's the one who puts the article in the customer's hands and hopes to get paid. Business means faith. Business means trust. And that's why in our country we don't write the words "In God we trust" on the wall of the church. We write it on the currency. Because it absolutely has to be that way. And friends, you've just got to realize that money is something that is spiritual. Money is not a physical thing. Money is spiritual. It's very hard to identify it. Little discs of metal or strips of colored paper, or maybe it's the iron oxide molecules on the back of your credit card. What is money? Money is something spiritual. You cannot put your hands on it. You can't touch it because it is God's measure of relationships within a society. In societies that are poverty-stricken and miserable, there is no communication, there is no relationship, there is no caring for one another. Money measures the extent to which we want to do things for our brothers and sisters, thereby pleasing our God in heaven. Is it any wonder that after pleasing our God in heaven in that fashion, that He should reward us, as indeed I know He will reward each and every one of you that puts these biblical lessons into your lives, with God-given prosperity. God bless you all. Thank you very much.
Wow. Now that I know it can be done, I will be smarter. I love the fresh perspective that we have just received. Everybody needs a rabbi. We thank Rabbi Lapin for being with us these 2 days and imparting to us. Can we thank him one more time? Thank you so much. I told Rabbi Lapin that my family is very pro-Jewish. I have a son named Judah, son-in-law named Perez, grandsons named Benaiah Jude, Zion, and Judah Elliott Wendell Smith, whose initials are Jews. So I am not anti-Semitic. Incredible. My mind is spinning. I'm a preacher and I'm thinking, I wish everybody hadn't heard this. I was the only one. Then I could share it. Come on, how many preachers were thinking that? You're going to go home and just steal it. You're just going to steal it. You're going to get up and go, in the Hebrew language, which you know nothing about. No, I'm just kidding. My. We've been so blessed. One of the things I marvel at and I appreciate, particularly in light of what has just been said about how much we need one another, is the uniqueness and complementary differences of the different speakers we have. And from Mike Rogers this morning, and I've already got the report, Mike, but you need to swim out to your ship and don't wait for it to come in. How many heard that? And of course, if Mike is on the ship, he's going to throw you off. But and tonight will be no different when you hear Phil Pringle, who's one of the most delightful, entertaining communicators, challenging, that I've ever met on the planet, all with an Australian accent. And you're going to enjoy that. Today at lunch, I want to do my introduction right now. Dr. Mark Strong is with us. He's the pastor of Life Change Christian Center in Portland, Oregon. And one of the things I appreciate about Mark, in fact, he has a new book coming out called Scarcity or Sufficiency. I believe that's the title. Is that correct? And we'll be promoting that. So there it is. There's our cover. And this will be coming out actually in just about a month or so. And we'll probably email all of you, make sure we do have your email information so that you can get an update on some of the stuff that is happening with the conference and also this new book. Pastor Mark is going to be able to share with us, and particularly any of our city pastor friends who are here with us for lunch, and for all of the pastors particularly, that this message works in the hood, in the city. And I've been there, Pastor Aaron, myself, and some others have been there, preached. This is a wonderful, dynamic, loving church growing right in the heart of the city of Portland. And you're going to hear from Dr. Mark Strong today at lunch. Right after lunch, at 2 o'clock, we'll be back here for what I think is one of the more important sessions of what we're going to discuss. We're not only going to be giving you some material that we want to hand out for free to you regarding the economy and how to address it, but then we want to discuss that. So Pastor Don Ostrom, myself, and George Reese, Mike Rogers, and Mike Robner will be here this afternoon at 2 o'clock to answer some questions. What do we do, and how do we address some of the things that are happening right now in the American economy particularly? And I think that will be very, very significant. Everyone said amen. Now, all this talk about 2:15, all right, we're going to shift the timing on that. All the talk about that if you don't serve other people, you will starve to death. You know, the more he talked about that, I got hungrier and hungrier, and I am ready for lunch. How about you? Lord, bless this food. We thank you for it and the rich fellowship that we will enjoy. Take sickness away from the midst of us. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you, everybody.